Hello, friends. A warm welcome to Next Page Wisdom. Today, we are going to talk about the book Nexus, a brief history of information networks from the Stone Age to AI. Have you ever thought that everything you are today, everything you think, is the result of an invisible web of information? A web that our ancestors began weaving millions of years ago, and which today stands before us as a challenge in the form of artificial intelligence. I guarantee you, after listening to this audiobook, the way you see the world, your relationships, and even yourself will change forever. Your life will never be the same again. Do you sometimes feel that it's hard to understand what is really happening in this world? Social media, news, AI, they all confuse you. Do you feel like some invisible force is controlling your thoughts? You are not alone. We are all diving in an ocean of information where it has become nearly impossible to tell the difference between truth and lies. This audiobook will give you the key to become the master of this web of information, not its slave. After listening, you will understand how stories transformed us from animals into humans, how a scrap of paper gave birth to empires, and how today the screen of your phone is writing your destiny. This audiobook is especially for those who want to peel back the layers of truth in this world, who want to take control of their own thinking. But if you are not ready to face the truth that your freedom might just be an illusion, then stop this audiobook right here. However, if you want to take control of your mind, then get ready for a journey that will blow your mind. Let's begin with Chapter 1. When Words Made Humans Gods, the birth of a new predator in the animal kingdom. Let's go far back in time. So far back that there were no cities, no villages, no farms, no internet. Only dense forests, dangerous animals, and a weak little creature called human. So, you might wonder why I am taking you back to that time. Because the root of today's story lies there. Back then, humans were not the strongest. The roar of a lion could shake the jungle. The ground trembled under the feet of elephants. Humans only hid, struggling to save their lives. Physically, we were weak. We had no sharp claws, no great speed, no tough skin. So how did this weak-looking creature become the master of the earth? The answer lies in one word: language. Yes, our ability to speak. You might say animals also make sounds. Monkeys give alarm calls when danger is near. True. A monkey can scream to warn others. Look, a lion is here, run. But can any monkey say, yesterday morning I saw a lion near the river, it might pass by this way again this afternoon, so we should be careful? No. That ability belonged only to humans. We could talk not just about the present, but about the past and the future. This was our first and most important superpower. The first network of information was created between our minds. But this network was not just for telling the truth. Its most revolutionary use was in telling lies, or rather, in telling stories. Surprised? But this is true. Our ability to talk about things that do not exist in reality set us apart from all other animals. One human could say to another, "A great spirit protects this forest and supports the brave." Now, no one could see or touch this great spirit, but everyone could believe in it. This single story could unite 100 strangers. They were no longer just 100 people. They were a tribe, bound by a shared belief. They could hunt together, fight enemies together. Meanwhile, 100 chimpanzees could never work together like this because they don't know or trust one another. This was the magic of stories. Stories taught us to live in large groups. Religion, nations, money, laws, companies, what are they? They are all stories. Have you ever touched a nation or eaten a rupee? No, a rupee is just a scrap of paper. But because we all believe in the story that this paper has value, the whole market runs. What is Google or Amazon? They are not one person, not one building. They are legal stories that millions of people believe in and work together to maintain. Yuval Noah Harari calls this the power of fiction or imagination. Sound. This first network of information, built on stories and beliefs, lifted us from small groups into societies of thousands and millions. We created gods, rules, traditions. These invisible threads bound us together in a way no other species has ever experienced. And we were no longer connected only by blood, but also by shared stories. But this network had one very big limitation. It depended on human memory. A story was passed from one generation to the next by word of mouth. An elder would tell the tribe's tales to his grandchildren, teach them the rules and laws. But there was a huge risk of mistakes. A story would change as it was told and retold, like the childhood game of Chinese whispers. A small tribe could perhaps manage this way, but how do you rule an empire of thousands or millions? How do you collect taxes from so many people? How do you keep track of soldiers' salaries? How do you create a law and make sure it is applied the same way across an empire? The human brain could not hold such vast amounts of data and information. Humanity stood on a threshold. To build great cities and empires, it needed a new, more reliable information network, a new technology. What was it that freed information from the limits of the human brain? What was the invention that made knowledge eternal on stone and changed human society forever? The answer lies in our next chapter, where we will understand the power of paper and ink. Chapter 2. The ink on paper. That wrote the fate of the world, say, when information that became immortal. In the previous chapter, we saw how language and stories bound humans into an invisible network, making us the most successful animal on Earth. But we also learned about a major weakness in this network. It relied entirely on human memory, which was unreliable and limited. To run a vast society, to keep track of thousands of people, to establish laws, this network was not enough. So how did humans meet this challenge? They created a revolution that took knowledge out of the human brain and established it in the external world. This revolution was the art of writing. Beginning with wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets in Sumerian civilization, and later moving to papyrus in Egypt, writing changed everything. For the first time, information could be given a physical form. It could be seen, touched, and most importantly, preserved for years. Now, a king's decree was not just a sound. It was a command carved in stone, unchangeable. Accounting was no longer just a matter of a merchant's memory. It was written in ledgers, in ace. This single invention gave birth to bureaucracy. The word may sound boring, but believe me, it is one of the most powerful forces in human history. Without writing, vast empires like the Roman Empire or the Mauryan Empire could never have existed. Think about it. How could an emperor sitting in his capital rule over provinces thousands of kilometers away? Through the art of writing, he could send written orders. Governors could study them and implement them, and then send written reports back to the capital. Taxes were recorded. Land was measured and documented. Everything was cataloged and classified. The world was no longer just a collection of people and things. It became an organized system of files, registers, and maps. Information was no longer like a flowing river. It became water stored in a reservoir, ready for the empire to use at will. This was a new, more powerful network of information made up of paper, ink, and officials. For the first time, it gave humans godlike power. A ruler could sit in one place and control the entire world at his fingertips, just through files and numbers. But this power came at a cost. This new network of knowledge was in the hands of only a few. Ordinary people did not know how to read or write. This art was restricted to priests, scribes, and royal officials. They kept knowledge a secret and used it as a source of power. Religious texts were written and declared to be the word of God. Now, God's voice was no longer in memory, but trapped inside a sacred book. And the right to study and interpret that book lay only with a select few. They decided what was true and what was false. They declared who would reach heaven and who would go to hell. Knowledge, which once existed as stories accessible to all, was now locked in the vaults of a privileged minority. The ordinary person's own thinking and understanding were chained. He had to believe whatever the priest or royal officer told him. His worldview was no longer his own. It was enslaved to written words he himself could not even read. And this went on for thousands of years. Knowledge remained confined in monasteries, temples, and libraries. For a common farmer, his life was no different from that of his great-grandfather. The world changed at a very slow pace because new ideas and new knowledge could not reach ordinary people. Every book had to be written by hand, a process that took months or even years. Copying a book was expensive and laborious, so books were few and precious. Knowledge remained the special privilege of a few. And imagine such a suffocating world, where questions arise in your mind, new ideas spark, but you have no way to share or spread them. Humanity became like a still pond, stagnant and unmoving. But then, in the 15th century, in a city in Germany, something happened that threw a giant stone into this still pond. A goldsmith invented a machine that unleashed a storm in the world of information, shaking the foundations of great empires and centuries-old religious authority. What was that machine? And how did it take knowledge out of the vaults of the few and place it in the hands of ordinary people? This is the story that brings us right to the doorstep of today's information age. Chapter 3. When a machine changed the way the world thought. The printing press explosion. In the last chapter, we saw how writing made information eternal, but also imprisoned it in the hands of a few. Knowledge was locked in sacred books and royal decrees, far from the reach of ordinary people. For centuries, the world continued this way. But then, as we hinted, one machine changed everything. That machine was Gutenberg's printing press. It was not just a machine, it was a revolution that forever transformed the network of information. Before this, copying a book took months. A monk or scholar would sit and slowly write letter by letter, word by word. But with the printing press, thousands of copies of a book could be printed in a single day. Overnight, books became cheap and accessible. Knowledge that was once locked in monasteries and palaces now began to spread into streets, markets, and the homes of ordinary people. Its first and most profound impact was on religion. A monk named Martin Luther questioned some practices of the powerful Catholic Church. He wrote down his 95 theses on a piece of paper and pinned them to the door of a church. In normal times, he would have been captured and burned alive, his ideas buried with him. But these were not normal times. It was the age of the printing press. Thousands of copies of Luther's questions were printed overnight and spread across Germany and then all of Europe. For the first time, ordinary people studied the Bible in their own language and discovered that many things the church told them were not even written in the Bible. People began to ask questions. They began to challenge centuries-old authority. The result was the Protestant Reformation, a religious movement that changed Europe forever and gave birth to terrible wars. Why did this happen? Because information was no longer under the control of just a few priests. This was a powerful example of how, when the network of information changes, the balance of power in the world also changes. But the impact was not limited to religion. In the world of science, an explosion took place. The ideas of Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton were no longer confined to just a few of their friends. They began to be published in books and reach scientists all over Europe. One scientist's work became the foundation for another. Knowledge began to accumulate rapidly and spread widely. This is what made the scientific revolution possible, which gave us the power to understand the laws of the universe. Along with this, the feeling of nationalism was also born. The printing press began producing thousands and millions of books, newspapers, and pamphlets in a single language. People who earlier thought of themselves as belonging only to their village or town now because of reading in the same language and literature began to feel like part of a nation. Languages like French, German, and English became standardized, and a sense of we grew among people. Stories of France or England, which earlier mattered only to kings, now became the identity of millions of common people. Yeni. So you see, a single machine changed the world. It challenged religion, gave birth to science, and created nations. The network of information, which had earlier been slow, costly, and controlled by a few, became fast, cheap, and democratic. This was the birth of mass media. It gave ordinary people the power to think, to question, and to form their own opinions. It gave birth to revolutions, like the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Ideas such as liberty, equality, and fraternity spread through pamphlets and books and inspired people to rise against monarchy. But this new network also had its challenges. Now anyone could print anything. Lies and propaganda spread just as fast as truth. Governments and kings tried to impose censorship and banned books, but it became impossible to stop the flood of information. Humanity had entered a new age where the battle of ideas became more important than the clash of swords. Yet the story was still incomplete. Information could now spread quickly, but it still took time to travel from one place to another. A book from London to Delhi could take months to arrive. The speed of information was still tied to ships and horses. To end this limit, another great technological leap was needed. A technology that would free information from physical travel and give it the speed of light. What was that? In the next chapter, we will step into the world of wires and waves and see how the telegraph, telephone, and radio shrank the world into a global village. Chapter 4. When information caught the speed of light. The web of wires and waves. The printing press had made information cheap and accessible, but its speed was still bound by the limits of the physical world. A letter or book crossing continents could take weeks or months. The world was vast, and distance mattered greatly. By the time news of a conflict reached another country, the conflict might already be over. But in the 19th century, everything was about to change. Humans learned to harness a force that was invisible, fast, and miraculous. Electricity. Using this electricity, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. This was an incredible moment in human history. For the first time, information did not need to travel physically. Through a wire, it could cover thousands of kilometers at nearly the speed of light. Now a merchant sitting in London could instantly know the price of the market in New York. A government could receive a message from its faraway ambassador in just hours. The world suddenly became much smaller. This new electric web was not limited to the telegraph. Soon, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, which made it possible to send the human voice through wires. Now, not only messages, but also voices and emotions could be felt across thousands of miles. This changed the way business was done, relationships were maintained, and even wars were fought. Think of it. Earlier, a general had to send a horseman to deliver a message to the king from the battlefield, which could take days. Now he could simply pick up a phone and give instructions directly. Control and power became even more centralized. Neat. Then came the magic of radio. Marconi showed that information could be sent not just through wires, but also through the air as waves. Now information could be transmitted not just from one point to another, but from one point to millions of people at once. A leader's speech, a song's melody, or the commentary of a cricket match could be heard across an entire country in the same moment. This new network created unprecedented power to shape public opinion. Politicians and dictators used it extensively. Dictators like Hitler made radio their most important weapon of propaganda. With his fiery voice, he could enter every home in his country, stir people's emotions, and prepare them for his dangerous ambitions. On the other hand, in democracies, Presidents and prime ministers also used radio to directly communicate with citizens and gain support for their policies. By the mid-20th century, with the arrival of television, this network became even more powerful. Now it was not only voices, but also images that reached people's living rooms. The Vietnam War is often called the first television war. For the first time, people saw the horrors of war with their own eyes. Dead bodies, burning villages. This deeply impacted American public opinion and sparked a massive anti-war movement. Nexus. This new visual network made it much harder for governments to hide the truth about war. The electric web had turned the world into a global village. Now, events in one corner of the world could instantly spread as news and images to the entire planet. It connected us to each other and made us part of a global culture. Hollywood movies, American pop music, all of it spread worldwide through this network. But this network also came with a cost. Information was now concentrated in the hands of a few massive media houses, news agencies, and state broadcasters. They decided what you would see, hear, and think. They set the agenda. The common man was mostly a passive consumer, sitting on the sofa and absorbing whatever was fed to him. He had no means of getting his own voice out to millions. The network was one way, top to bottom. But at the end of the 20th century, a new technology arose that was about to overturn this entire equation. A web that promised to give everyone the power to create, share, and spread information. A web that showed the dream of completely decentralizing power. But did this web truly set us free? Or did it trap us in a new and even more complex cage? In the next and final chapter, we will dive into the digital age, the world of the internet and artificial intelligence that we live in today. Chapter 5. The human-made web that trapped its maker, the digital ocean and the rise of AI. Our journey has now reached the point where we are today. The earlier revolutions, whether writing, printing, or the electric web, all made the flow of information faster and wider. But they all had one thing in common. The power to create information and spread it on a massive scale was in the hands of a few, whether priests, publishers, or media houses. The ordinary person was mostly just a consumer. Then came the internet. This was no small change. It was an explosion. It promised to completely democratize the information network. Now anyone, from anywhere, could broadcast their voice to the entire world. A blogger, a YouTuber, or even an ordinary citizen on social media could challenge the biggest newspapers and TV channels. The pyramid of power suddenly turned upside down. Information no longer flowed only from top to bottom, but in all directions. This was an incredibly empowering experience. Popular movements like the Arab Spring were organized through social media. People found their voice, told their stories, and shook established powers. Knowledge was now at everyone's fingertips. Wikipedia created the largest encyclopedia in the world and made it free for all. Google made it possible to find any information in a second. YouTube changed the way we learn and teach. It looked like a utopia, an ideal world. But as Yuval Noah Harari warns us, every information revolution brings new dangers. In this digital ocean, where everyone is creating information, the line between truth and lies has almost disappeared. Fake news, misinformation, and propaganda spread like viruses. Earlier, editors and journalists acted as gatekeepers filtering information. Now there are no gatekeepers. A lie spreads as fast as truth, often faster, because it excites our emotions. Society is becoming more polarized. People are trapped in their own echo chambers, hearing only the ideas they already agree with. And then, into this story, entered a new and the most powerful player. Algorithms. Companies like Facebook, Google, and Amazon do not just give you information. They constantly collect information about you. What you like, what you share, which video you linger on, every click is recorded. By analyzing this vast data, AI-based algorithms create a digital profile of you. They know you better than you know yourself, what you like, what your political views are, and what your next step might be. Then they show you the content that keeps you even more engaged, keeps you clicking. The network of information is now no longer run only by humans, but also by smart machines. These machines decide what you read, what you watch, and ultimately, what you think. We have entered an era where human attention is the most important currency, and giant corporations and governments exploit our emotions and weaknesses to capture this currency. And this is just the beginning. Now we are entering the age of artificial intelligence, where machines are not just organizing information, but creating new information and new content. AI can now write articles, create pictures, compose music. Soon, we will be in a world where most of the content on the internet will not be made by humans but by AI. Then how will we trust what we read or see as truth? When AI can perfectly mimic a person's voice or face, how will we trust our friends and leaders? This could be the most critical challenge in human history. The network of information, which began with language, is now on the verge of becoming an entity beyond human understanding and control. We have woven a web that now has the power to control us. Will we remain the masters of this web, or will we become its slaves? Will humanity use this new network to build a better future, or will it mark the beginning of the end of our civilization? These are not just philosophical questions. They are directly tied to our daily lives. Chapter 6. The Essence of Nexus and the Road Ahead. So where do we go now? After this long and thrilling journey, we find ourselves here. We saw how, millions of years ago, networks of stories and imagination made us. Homo sapiens, rulers of this planet. Then we saw how writing immortalized those stories and gave birth to great empires and religions, but also trapped knowledge in the fists of a few. Then came the printing press, which exploded that knowledge free, leading to scientific revolutions and the rise of democracy. Then the wires and waves of electricity shrank the world into a global village where information traveled at the speed of light. And finally, we arrived in today's digital age, where the internet and artificial intelligence have created a global information system that is both unbelievably powerful and dangerously risky. The essence of Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus is this. The key to understanding human history is understanding how information networks evolved. Power has always belonged to those who controlled these networks. Today, the greatest struggle in the world is not for land or resources, but for information and attention. Whoever controls your attention controls your thinking, and whoever controls your thinking controls you. We now stand at a crossroads. One path can lead us to a future where, with the right use of AI and information, we can solve problems like poverty, disease, and war, where every human being can realize their full potential. The other path leads to a dark future, where algorithms and AI make all decisions for us, where our freedom becomes an illusion, and where humans become slaves to the very technology they created. A world where digital dictatorship rises, more dangerous than any dictatorship in history, because it controls us from inside our hearts and minds. So what should we do? Harari does not give us ready-made answers, but he forces us to ask the right questions. The very first step is awareness, understanding how this network works. Whenever you scroll your phone, ask yourself, why is this content being shown to me? Whose purpose does it serve? We need to be extremely careful and mindful about our attention. We must seek diverse sources of information, listen to people with different opinions, and build the habit of asking questions instead of blindly believing everything. We must teach our children history and philosophy so that they can understand how the world works and recognize the dangers of the digital world. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this audiobook summary. This journey was not easy, but I hope it made you think. If you enjoyed this journey and learned something new, please like this video. It inspires us to create more such audiobooks. Do share in the comments what you found the most surprising and how you deal with the challenges of today's digital world. Your thoughts are very important to us. And yes, if you want to listen to more such enlightening and life-understanding audiobook summaries, don't forget to subscribe to the Books and channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos. We'll meet again in the next journey with a new book and new ideas. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning. Thank you.